Hello everyone, I have come with another video today, and the video will focus primarily on uh, structuring the research paper that you are currently writing or you're preparing for your next paper. So hopefully what I discuss today might help you to make your final output a bit more attractive for the editors and the reviewer and for the journal. So let's begin. Remember that there are a variety of ways you can structure your paper, and it sometimes will depend on the type of the research method that you have applied or the journal that you have chosen to submit, because always remember to look at the author's guidelines for each journal, and there it is essential that you structure your research outcome based on the format that the journal is required from the authors. But I'm going to start with some basic discussion on writing a research papers and basic guidelines to structure the paper for your next submission. And to do that, I'm looking at this paper published in Oxford Academic Journal or International Journal of Quality in Healthcare. This journal was published in 2004, quite a while ago, but I believe that the basic premise still is applicable. So I'm going to share this paper link in the video. You can always have a look. This is free for everyone to access, I believe. So what I'm looking at is here is the structure of the paper. What should be a typical structure of the paper? And the good thing about this paper, I'm just going to stay on here for a while. It not only tells you that you should have an introduction, but it also gives you an idea what should be there in the introduction. And sometimes when as a reviewer or an editor of a journal, I see that uh, authors sometimes don't really understand or really do not capture the introduction properly. And remember that the introduction is the very first segment of the paper anyone will be looking at. So it is important that you focus on explaining the key research issues very clearly in the introduction. And that is what is mentioned here, that the first thing that we want to see is your problem statement. That means you have to state why the problem you address is important. And most of the cases, if I am honest in this case, I would say that I see that authors are mentioning that the research is important because there is not enough evidence, or in the past there has not been enough studies. Now, the issue is that I'm not saying that it is not a valid problem. Yeah, it might be, but it doesn't give that much of justification. Just because the evidence was not there in the past, it's not going to give you that much of uh, push, or what I would say, that it will not give that much of validation in doing this research. So what is good is in the introduction you state why the problem you address is important from a practical perspective. Try to link it with something that is happening now in the world. Then they mention state what is lacking in the current knowledge. So that is where you can link that, okay, this is the problem is real, it is happening, and now you try to see whether there was enough evidence, and then you can say that there is a gap. There is a research gap, that is what you are trying to address. But only because there was not enough research on something, that may not be a very valid reason to just continue and doing a research. And then state the objectives very clearly. Um, Sometimes there is overlap on the objective and question, but make sure your objectives are clear in the introduction. Uh, these days, some papers they also mention their contribution in the introduction. That's also very important. Sometimes you can just highlight what are the key findings and then state that these findings contribute in this way. Now, this paper did not mention because, as I mentioned, different journal, different techniques. So most of the cases you will see after introduction, there will be literature review where you provide a critical analysis of past research that is relevant in your current uh, agenda, and then you try to reflect what they have found and how they missed few things, which creates a gap that helps you to conduct this research, which can reduce those gaps. So after introduction, it is nowadays very common to have a literature review section where you not only look at the past research from the empirical perspective, but also you can look at the theoretical framework that will provide you the ground, the basis that you can use to continue and explore the research issue that you have identified in the introduction. After that, the method section is quite important because uh, this will make or break your research. And at the end of the day, if your method section is not really solid and clear, you might end up getting a rejection because that has so many things to do with the reliability of your findings, repetition of the study, replicability of the study, and verifiability of the study findings. So make sure whatever you have done, it doesn't matter whether this is a survey-based research or a secondary database research. If it is a quantitative database research, the method section is very important. If you are doing a qualitative study, it may not be that critical, and I will show you some examples what I'm trying to say. So try to make sure that when you are in the method section, I'm not going through or read, you can always read through. What I'm trying to emphasize is make sure you have a method section if you are doing a quantitative study. It doesn't matter whether this is a survey or a secondary database study. It can be panel data, can be cross-sectional, can be time series, but in the method section, make sure you explain everything you have done with as much details as you can. After that, you have to have a result section, and we are also, as I should say that at this moment, that we are focusing more on the quantitative studies, and that is why method and results are quite important. Where sometimes I have seen my students and also sometimes authors, they overlap or mix these two. What is the difference between results and discussion? As you can see here, they mention that in the results section, you report the data collection, you report the statistics of your respondent or your secondary data, and you can also present some of the information that is coming out from the results. But in the discussion, you have to explain what this information mean and how can you relate that with your research objective and your study rationale at the beginning when you have discussed that this is a problem. So how these results help you to explain those problems? That is where you have to discuss. You have to also make sure that when you are discussing, you relate your study findings with the past studies, because it's not only what you have found, you have to make sure that you mention what is similar or different than the past studies. That is also quite important. That you just only don't only reflect on, okay, I have found this, I have done this, I have done that. It's much important that you also mention how is it comparable? What have you found different? Is it everything that you found conform to the past studies? If you found something different, is it theoretically valid? So you have to also reflect the study findings from the perspective of the theory that you are supposed to discuss in the literature review section. Uh, so after the discussion, we normally have a conclusion section, which is also a very important part. And the conclusion section should provide a summary of the key findings. Try to show or you have to explain how your objectives were met based on the findings. And the most important and the significant part is the policy implication. That means, how does these findings help uh, anyone? It can be for the regulators, it can be for the practitioners, can be for the industry. How do you think that they might benefit from these study findings? You have to also mention this in the conclusion. So I'm not going to prolong the video. I want to keep the video length below 15 minutes. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you some example of two different types of paper. One is coming from critical perspective of accounting, and just because um, most of my research and my field is in accounting, so I'm giving you this example. If you are in any other field, you might be able to follow, should not be so different. So the critical perspective accounting, they publishes mostly qualitative papers. So as you can see, it always starts with an introduction, and they also gives the different types of evidence, mention different types of issues in the introduction, and then afterwards you will see it does not have any type of traditional structure, because that is the beauty of a qualitative paper. It's like telling a story. So the structure, it will depend on the author and the type of story they're trying to say. So you see, that's it's like they are talking about some myths about sustainability reporting. So these are all of those issues they have discussed in here, and then finally they have a discussion in conclusion. So this is an example of a qualitative paper where the study structure, the paper structure depends on mostly on the author and the type of story they're trying to say. However, if I look at the British Accounting Review, which I'm not saying they don't publish qualitative, but the number of quantitative papers are quite uh, good. And if you look at the paper structure, is quite traditional. You start with an introduction as always, but then they delve into literature review, which is again divided into different sections. You'll see the theoretical framing or framework is here, which is related with the hypothesis they develop. So this is a very key part. Developing hypothesis. I will have a separate video on hypothesis development and theory in future. I have this in my mind. Hopefully, I can do all this. So then you see the third section is the method. So sometimes they say method, sometimes it is just data. This time they have mentioned data and data statistics. So it is not like written in stone. You can have some changes within uh, the traditional structure, but then everything they have, the sample, the variables, everything they have mentioned very clearly. If you are not clear in describing your data, your sample, your variables, these days I can assure you that instead of a major correction, it might lead to a rejection. So be careful about this. I'm saying this because uh, like received some rejection because some of the discussion of my variables or sample was not so clear. So I'm just telling you that be careful about those things. Then here you have descriptive statistics, all the information. These are the results, and you can see results based on the baseline regression. What are those things? I will not discuss it here, maybe in future. So after results, you have your what they have done. They have discussed the results at the same time. So they have discussed, interpreted the results and also provided the discussion. As you can see, this citation means that they have compared with the past studies here. So results and discussions are together, and finally you have the conclusion. I believe it's so many tests. After all these tests, you have the conclusion here. You can see the contributions are here. Sometimes it is here, sometimes in the introduction. Then you have the list of variables and the definition, everything, references, done. Okay, so I hope this video was helpful, and I wish you a wonderful day. Bye.